Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Mindfully Aligned. I'm your host, Adanze Benjamin, and can you believe this is our 10th episode? Yes, it's so crazy. We have been having important conversations, diving into our deepest, truest selves, and getting the perspectives of really awesome guests for 10 episodes now. So I want to say, first of all, thank you all so much for tuning in and letting me know how each episode has impacted you or how you're implementing it into your own life. It really means so much to me, and I absolutely love doing this. So thank you again for tuning in for 10 episodes. Today, we're going to be diving into a topic I think everyone can relate to. It's negative thoughts and perspective. This is something that can be a major roadblock in accomplishing our goals, loving ourselves, and trying to become the best version of ourselves overall. Let's talk about how we can shift our perspectives on those pesky negative thoughts that we all may have. Negative thoughts are something, again, we all experience from time to time. They can sneak up on us in the really quiet moments or bombard us during stressful times. They tend to pop up their ugly heads when we're insecure or anxious. But what are negative thoughts really? They're essentially our mind's way of processing and reacting to perceived threats or discomfort. These thoughts can be about ourselves or others or even situations we find ourselves in. But the thing is, they often distort reality. When we let the negative thoughts win, we don't even see all the beauty and simplicity our life has around us. So when we're just caught up in this negative way of thinking, the way that we approach our lives, the way that we see certain things, it warps and becomes really ugly. Even the simplest of things, the dress you're wearing, the gift someone got you, we can take the most simple things in life and spin it to be something negative, and in reality, our life isn't meant to be that way. So we really want to figure out what is the block here that gets us into that space and how we can get around that. So let's break it down. Negative thoughts can manifest as self-doubt, fear of failure, or even catastrophizing, imagining the worst possible outcomes. It's important that we recognize these patterns because the first step in shifting our perspective is having awareness. So you want to really ask yourself or be able to stop yourself and think, okay, this thought that I'm having, is this really me? Do I really feel this way? Or is something else motivating this? Am I really projecting right now? Is this coming from an insecure space or a jealous space or a hurt space? What is really fueling this thought that I'm having? In order to get around negative thoughts, there are a few pillars that we're going to talk about in this episode. The first one being the power of perspective. Basically understanding why this is even important. Why does it matter? Everyone has negative thoughts. Why do I have to be so stringent about interrupting them? Isn't this something everyone else does? Yes, but perspective really is everything. It's the lens through which we view the world. When we're stuck in a cycle of negative thinking, our perspective narrows, and it becomes harder to see the bigger picture of life. But when we start to shift our perspective, we can begin to change the narrative of our thoughts. So it's really about getting to the root of it. Again, when you have these negative thoughts, it might come from an insecure space, an angry space, a jealous space. Whatever it is, that's your perspective. That's where the negative thought originates. So you want to address that feeling that you're having first so that you can then change your perspective. Maybe you want to change to a perspective of gratitude or optimism or authenticity, whatever it is, so that now you view the world from that perspective, so then your thoughts can reflect that new optimism that you have. Think about it like this. Have you ever been in a situation that felt overwhelmingly negative at that moment, but later, after some distance and you're able to think about it after, you could see the positives or the lessons learned? That's really the power of perspective. Because in life, when we're really going through something, we're just in the trenches, we're in the thick of it, we're not paying attention to the world up above us, we're really just stuck in that moment. And when you're stuck in that moment, you fail to see everything else that's going on, and that is perspective. And so once you remove yourself from that situation, hindsight is always 20/20. You're able to see, oh wow, I understand why the universe put me in that position. I understand why God put me in that position. If I didn't experience that, I would not have learned XYZ. And I really needed to know XYZ in order to be able to do blank in the future. And there's a ton of examples of this, and we're going to touch on a lot of these in this episode, but that really is the power of perspective wrapped all into one. When we're going through something, we can't really see all the benefits, and so negative thinking has us believe that what we're going through or the way we see it right now is the end-all be-all, and it's not. So that's something we definitely really want to address. So we also want to take note of how these negative thoughts can affect us. Negative thoughts can manifest in your internal world, also known as how you see yourself, and your external world, how you see others. I've noticed that when I hear overly critical thoughts from others, it often reflects how they treat themselves internally. If you're constantly hard on yourself, it's easy to project that onto others. For example, have you ever heard an insecure person, someone who's deep down really insecure, speak out loud about other people? They are very harshly critical, but that's because that's the same inner voice that they use in their own mind. That's the same inner voice that they use to address themselves. And so they're projecting that onto others. And now compare that to somebody who is genuinely confident and happy with themselves. Someone who is genuinely confident and happy with themselves and at peace with who they are doesn't have many negative things to say about other people because their inner voice is pretty positive, and so the perspective and the lens they see the outside world with is positive. Even if people are doing something that they don't like, or maybe what she's wearing isn't according to my taste, it doesn't bother them because they like what they're wearing and they're happy with that. So if you find yourself having critical thoughts of others, you might want to ask yourself, am I really hard on myself too? Am I insecure? Am I slightly envious of others sometimes? How can I stop that? How can I interrupt those thoughts? And how can I be easier on myself so that in turn I can be easier on others? To shift this perspective, start by decluttering your mind and making it a positive space. In previous episodes, we've talked so much about how to make your mind a positive space, change what you consume, affirmations, playlists, Pinterest boards, vision boards, the whole nine. Pick two, it'll work. Because when you change the perspective from which you see the world, I promise it'll become a much more beautiful place. When you change the narrative that you have within, little things that people do doesn't bother you anymore. People's stories that they're posting that doesn't make sense to you, that doesn't bother you anymore. You don't have any comments to make on that anymore. People's outfits or what have you, what other people are doing with their lives, that doesn't bother you when you're truly at peace with what you are doing. And that should be all that matters. Again, I used this example in the last episode, but you really want to be a horse with blinders on in a race, just focused on what you need to be focused on. When you are unhappy with yourself, that's when you start to distract yourself, or honestly, your brain subconsciously starts to distract yourself with getting upset about things that don't matter, nitpicking and being overly critical about things that don't matter, because your brain is really trying to just distract you from caring about what does matter, and that's you, what's going on within. So when faced with critical thoughts, you want to ask yourself, does this directly affect me? Are they happy with what they're doing? Are they harming anyone? These questions can help you determine if the negativity is worth your energy or not, and can reveal if you are really just having an internal struggle inside, and you can really think back to everything and think, okay, maybe I need to check in with myself. Maybe I need to kind of recalibrate, declutter my mind, and get and elevate into a more positive way of thinking. And when we have a negative mindset, it really can impact your life on the whole. A negative mindset can make you miss out on the things that are meant for you. For instance, you might focus on the negatives in a failure, but you can shift that mentality to see all that it's taught you and the doors it's opened for you. For example, let's say you really prepared for a job interview, but you didn't get the position. But the next opportunity that comes along, you nailed it because you were so well prepared from the last time. If the opportunity that was meant for you had come up sooner, you might not have been ready for it, and it could have passed you by. And this is something I think about a lot in life. Whenever you may face rejection or it seems like a door has been slammed in your face, you don't realize that that was really the universe or God preparing you for something. You never ever miss what's meant for you. Nothing that's meant for you will ever pass you by. So it makes us look at the negative things like rejection, failure, in a more positive light because we know, okay, that must have been meant to happen. That must have been part of the divine plan. The same goes for relationships. Every failed relationship or situationship, what have you, is actually preparing you for the one that's meant for you. I try not to think of a failure as a waste of time, ever, because it really just was a lesson. I think of it as collecting tools through our lives that allow us to become the people that we're meant to be. Maybe we learn patience or how to stand up for ourselves, or maybe discernment, like being able to tell if someone isn't right for you so that you know how to recognize when someone is right for you. When we replay the mantra of nothing meant for us will ever pass us by, it allows us to think of situations like that inevitably come up in life with a newfound gratitude. The next time a job rejects you, or a school rejects you, or a potential relationship falls apart, we can have a new perspective of, okay, I'm not doomed. Your negative thinking will want to tell you it's because you're stupid or not good enough or not lovable, but that's not the case. The case is you are meant to have what you're meant to have. And a positive mindset can help us abandon that negative spiral thinking that can come from rejection and turn it into something positive that keeps us going. Okay, I am smart. I know I'm worthy. I know I'm lovable. It's just this one wasn't meant for me, and this actually prepared me for what is meant for me, and I know it's just down the road. That is the power of perspective. That's the power of a positive mindset. A negative mindset will make the roadblocks in your life look like insurmountable boulders. Without the right mindset, you can't even clearly think of solutions. You start to develop excuses like the what ifs and the I can't because blank. That gets you nowhere but back to the exact place you started. And we don't want to get stuck in that loop, so it's important to use strategies to shift our perspective. So for starters, one way to get around this, as I mentioned, is reframing our thoughts. When a negative thought arises, try to reframe it. Instead of thinking, I can't do this, I'm dumb, or whatever, shift it instead to something more productive that aligns with that best version of yourself that we talked about a few episodes ago. Okay, this is challenging, but I can find a way through it. It's about changing that narrative from one of defeat to one of possibility instead. If you're really trying to shift your mentality, if you feel like, okay, I'm deep in a bad place, this seems like a lot. How do I do this? You can be even more strict with it to see faster progress. Every time you have a negative thought, try to flip it to the opposite of that. Again, you just got rejected by someone you really like. You might be feeling like, oh, I'm unlovable. You can instantly flip that to, I am lovable, comma, and then add an affirmation. I am lovable, but he doesn't see it, and that's okay because someone is. The person who's meant for me is. And it might seem silly at first and very unnatural, but the more you practice it, the more it settles in your mind as truth, and you then become that person. That's the thing that's so important to remember about negative thoughts, is that you can become them, and you don't want to become them. If you repeat to yourself enough that you are not worthy of love or you are not worthy of that job, you will start to manifest that for yourself. You will start to become that because you are telling your subconscious that. And when you tell your subconscious that enough, it acts it out. So you want to now counteract that. And as those thoughts arise, because sometimes they do, just come up with the opposite of that and run with that thought. I am worthy of being hired. In fact, I am an asset to any employer who seeks me out. Interrupt those thoughts, create that positive loop in your brain, and it will really make such a difference. The next tip I have is to practice gratitude. And I know everyone says it, but it's completely true. Gratitude really is that understanding of everything that is meant for you will never pass you by. Because when you have that mantra in your head, it makes you a lot more grateful for the journey. And what I mean by that is, it's almost like remembering that you are destined for certain things. You are destined to experience certain things. You are destined to have certain joys in life. And anything that is not that is still taking you closer to whatever that is, because it's preparing you for that. And now you are grateful for that experience because it prepares you for what you are meant to have. It reminds me kind of the Ariana Grande song, Thank You Next, because she's listing all her past relationships and she has something to say about all of them, but in reality, they all taught her something. And so she can say thank you to them because thanks to you, I learned that lesson. And if I didn't learn that lesson, I would never be able to have my soulmate, because if I met my soulmate as the unhealed version of myself, the version of myself that never collected those valuable life lessons, my soulmate would have just passed me by. And the same goes for any opportunity that we're meant to have. We have to be grateful for all the things that might bruise us or knock us down along the way, because it makes us that much stronger. It shapes us and molds us into that final best version of ourselves that is meant to have that thing. You needed to work those internships or those menial jobs you didn't like as much in order to collect the experience that was required for your dream job. It all works like that. So when you're toiling or you're in the trenches, you can express gratitude for the experience alone. Even if it's not fun, even if you don't love it, you don't have to love it. But just understanding that there is a deeper reason, a higher reason for everything that we're doing. And finally, just talking it out is a great way to work through those negative thoughts. It can be with a friend or a therapist, or even just journaling or recording voice memos. Sometimes it's good to just shout into the void. So instead of just projecting negative or insecure thoughts or anxious thoughts, try to sit with yourself for a second and identify what is really making you insecure or anxious, and then try to hash that out with a friend, therapist, or your journal. Really address what deep down is making you feel that way so that you can then move forward. And it's easy when we're just stuck with ourselves to get stuck in a loop of the anxiety or the insecurities. So when we bring in someone else to have a productive conversation about it, it really does make all the difference. And by talking to a friend about it, I don't mean having like a negative conversation an unproductive conversation, an unhealthy conversation, dragging someone else into your negativity or dragging someone else into your gossiping. I mean, having a healthy conversation, a healthy dialogue about what's really bothering you in life, what's really making you feel this way. And again, that really does start with you identifying that with yourself first. So definitely you want to take the time to have that conversation with yourself first. That's step one. And then you can work on addressing that with your support system, whoever that may be. So all these words are coming from a place that's near and dear to my heart. I feel like anybody who is quote-unquote mindfully aligned has had to combat or find a way to work around those negative thoughts. And for me, it's manifested in a few ways. I've dealt with this in a few areas of life, but one example is in terms of work and productivity. For me, there was a time when I was consumed by negative thoughts about my work. And there was nothing wrong with what I was doing. I just was and still am an overachiever, a perfectionist, and so I was finding myself not being pleased with what I was doing, and between juggling work and 20 credits, it felt like I'd never had enough time to devote to my work and get everything that I wanted to get done. And so I started to develop a really negative relationship with time and really negative thoughts about what I'm doing with my time. I felt like I wasn't doing enough. Even though I was working and juggling school, I still felt like I wasn't doing enough, and it was just eating away at me. But then I had to really sit with myself and have a perspective shift. I was like, okay, am I comparing my productivity to a full-time assistant or an assistant who is also juggling school? I'm an assistant juggling school, and so I had to use that to shift my perspective and kind of check myself. Because of that, I had a moment where I was like, wait a minute, I'm not getting nothing done. I'm actually getting a lot done for someone who is also juggling school and trying to do well at that too. So instead of beating myself up on all the things I couldn't finish or all the things I couldn't do because I didn't have the time, instead I was patting myself on the back for everything I did wind up getting done that day. And so once I shifted my perspective from that, I stopped feeling like I was in this impossible race against time. I stopped feeling like I was battling myself for productivity. I stopped feeling like I was burning myself out. And I was like, okay, you know what? I am a student. I am in class. I do have things to do for school. And I have work that I do love to do. How can I do both at my best today? And through that, I was able to understand, okay, sometimes my best looks different than other days. Sometimes I have to lean more into school because I have an exam, or sometimes I have to lean more into work because we have a big week coming up. It allowed me to be patient with myself by kind of sitting with myself and getting real and being like, okay, Danze, you are just putting way too many expectations on yourself. Let's flip these thoughts. And so I hope that that is an example many of you can relate to. It's just a matter of reassessing your situation and thinking, okay, how can I reframe this? It's not that I'm not doing enough. It's actually that I'm doing a lot given my circumstances. And this reframing of thoughts can play into so many other examples of life, and I hope that moving forward you can employ them too. So, all in all, just remember that these negative thoughts are natural, but they don't have to control you. By shifting your perspective, you can transform these thoughts and see the world in a much more positive light. It takes practice and patience, but it is definitely possible. I've done it, and I know you can do it. And so I hope this episode inspired you to do the same and apply it to your life. So before we close out, I want to give you guys the song of the week. It's an Ariana Grande joint, Just Like Magic, and it's a great song. I know I already mentioned her in this episode, but that's because I feel like a lot of her music, if you really listen to it, has themes about manifesting and your mentality, and Just Like Magic is one of the biggest ones with that message. It's about just having the right mentality, journaling, manifesting, keeping your mind in check, your mind aligned with your goals and the person you want to be. And it is a really cute song. I feel like she perfectly bottled up that sound of being a manifesting, magical person and just put it in a song. I think it sounds great. I'm sure a lot of you have heard it, if not all, but if you're working on that manifestation playlist, this is definitely one to add. I love Ari, so yes, I am an Ari needer, yes. But yeah, again, it's called Just Like Magic by Ariana Grande. I hope you enjoy listening. I hope it makes you feel as elevated as I do. And yeah, that's this week's episode. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope these insights and strategies help you as much as they have helped me in my life. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you think may benefit from it. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences and how you are able to apply this to your life. So feel free to reach out to me on social media or leave a comment. Be sure to also subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already and leave a 5-star review. And until next time, take care and I'll see you next week.